Welcome to Old School Sundays. I'm your host, Odell. Let's get into some history. They said he was too tall to run crisp routes, too tall to bend his knees, get low, and break on a dime, too tall to fit into the NFL's picture of what a wide receiver should look like. But on Sunday afternoons in the 1970s, Harold Carmichael stood like a skyscraper among men, a 6'8" mismatch who defied every rule in the playbook. In a league built on speed and swagger, he played with quiet dominance, catching passes that looked impossible, shrugging off defenders like gnats, and turning doubt into data, season after season, catch after catch. For over a decade, he was the Philadelphia Eagles' heartbeat, a humble superstar buried under the weight of bigger markets and louder names. He didn't talk that much, he didn't need to. His game spoke volumes. And yet, for decades after his final snap, the Hall of Fame stayed silent, as if greatness could be measured by noise instead of numbers. This is the story of Harold Carmichael, the man they said was too tall for football until he made the game rise to meet him. Before Harold Carmichael became an NFL giant, he was just a lanky kid growing up under the southern sun of Jacksonville, Florida. Born in 1949, he came of age in the heart of segregation, where opportunity for young black athletes was limited to whatever scraps the system allowed. But Carmichael was different. Even as a teenager, his size drew stares. He towered over classmates, his long arms hanging past his knees, his legs built for strides that seemed to eat up half the field in a single bound. At Rains High School, he was raw but electric, the kind of athlete coaches didn't quite know what to do with. Too big for receiver, too thin for tight end, too smooth to be a lineman. But every time the ball went up, Harold came down with it. He earned a scholarship to Southern University, one of the powerhouse HBCUs that quietly built the backbone of black football. There, amid marching bands, fried fish Fridays, and a community that believed in its own, Harold found his rhythm. He wasn't just tall, he was fluid, coordinated, a mismatch no defender could solve. At Southern, he played alongside future pros, including Mel Blount. He learned discipline, patience, and pride, traits that would serve him later when the world didn't believe in what it couldn't understand. By the time the Philadelphia Eagles drafted him in 1971, Carmichael was ready, but the league wasn't. To the NFL scouts and coaches of the time, he wasn't just an unknown, he was an anomaly. And in a league run by tradition, anomalies rarely get second chances. When Harold Carmichael arrived in Philadelphia in 1971, the city didn't quite know what to make of him. At 6'8" and nearly 230 pounds, he looked more like a power forward than a wide receiver. Coaches had never seen anything like him, and most didn't want to. To them, his height was a problem, not a gift. They said he couldn't get low enough in his routes, that he'd be too slow in and out of breaks, that cornerbacks would jam him before he ever got off the line. In an era before today's creative offenses, the NFL didn't know what to do with a player who didn't fit the mold. Carmichael struggled through his first two seasons, bouncing between the bench and the bottom of the depth chart, cut and re signed more than once. He caught just a handful of passes and was nearly written off as another training camp experiment gone wrong. But while others saw limits, Harold saw leverage. He began to master the subtle art of positioning, using his frame like a shield, turning short routes into unstoppable mismatches. He learned the high point passes that no other receiver could even reach. In practice, teammates watched in disbelief as Carmichael plucked footballs out of the air like fruit off of a tree. One by one, the excuses started to fall away. By 1973, under a new coaching staff and new sense of purpose, the tall kid everyone doubted was about to make the entire league look up. Literally. The same height that once made him a misfit was about to make him a nightmare for every defensive back in football. By the fall of 1973, something clicked. The awkward kid who was too tall to play finally had a coach who stopped trying to shrink him into a traditional receiver and instead build an offense around his gifts. That season, the NFL met with the new prototype. Harold Carmichael wasn't just catching passes, he was snatching souls. Defensive backs bounced off of him. Safeties who thought they could go high for the ball found themselves a full foot short. He turned jump balls into sure things and short slants into highlight reels. Carmichael finished the season with 67 receptions, 1,116 yards, and 9 touchdowns, all elite numbers, and in an era where most teams barely threw the ball 30 times a game. Overnight, the man the league once doubted became the Philadelphia Eagles' first true superstar of the modern era. The city embraced him the only way Philly can: loud, loyal, and unapologetic. Fans filled Veterans Stadium wearing Feed Harold shirts. Broadcasters couldn't find enough superlatives. Even opposing coaches admitted there was no game plan for someone that size with that kind of grace. But through all the noise, Carmichael stayed grounded. He wasn't the type to pound his chest or seek headlines, he just went to work, week after week, season after season. From 1973 to 1980, no wide receiver in the NFL caught more passes or gained more yards. And yet, his dominance never turned him into a household name. Because while the rest of the league was celebrating America's team in Dallas and the Steel Curtain in Pittsburgh, Harold Carmichael was quietly rewriting what a receiver could be, one towering catch at a time. Philadelphia has always loved its fighters, the ones who take hits and keep moving forward. And in the 1970s, no player embodied that spirit more than Harold Carmichael. He wasn't the flashiest wideout in the league, but he was the most reliable. When the Eagles were bad, and for most of the early 70s they were really bad, Carmichael was the one bright light in a dark era. He caught passes from six different quarterbacks on losing teams that rarely made headlines. Yet every Sunday, he showed up. Silent, consistent, unshakable. In a city famous for booing Santa Claus, Harold earned something far rarer: respect. Fans in Veterans Stadium saw him not just as a player, but as a reflection of themselves: hardworking, unpretentious, and impossible to ignore once he found his rhythm. Then came Dick Vermeil, the young, fiery head coach who arrived in 1976 with one goal: change everything. Vermeil's relentless work ethic matched Carmichael's calm leadership perfectly. Together, they helped transform the Eagles from a laughingstock into a contender. By 1980, the turnaround was complete. Carmichael was the steady veteran at the heart of a locker room full of hungry underdogs. He didn't yell or grandstand, he led with presence. And when the Eagles made their first ever Super Bowl appearance in 1981, it felt like poetic justice. Philadelphia had finally risen from the ashes, and standing tallest, both literally and symbolically, was the man who never gave up on the team that once didn't know what to do with him. Harold Carmichael wasn't just an eagle, he was Philadelphia. Strong, humble, and built to outlast the storm. Harold Carmichael's numbers said superstar, but the spotlight said otherwise. While Carmichael was catching everything thrown his way in Philadelphia, the national media was busy elsewhere. The cameras were in Dallas, following Roger Staubach and America's team. They were in Pittsburgh, turning the steel curtain into a brand. They were in Oakland filming Al Davis and the Bad Boy Raiders. Philadelphia wasn't a glamour market. It was gritty, cold, and blue collar. And Carmichael fit that mold perfectly. He didn't do flashy celebrations, he didn't demand attention. He played the game the way working class fans live their lives: head down, hands ready, and heart full. But that quiet nature came at a cost. In an era when self promotion was becoming part of the game, Harold's humility made him easy to overlook. He never complained, never called out the league for its indifference, never demanded credit. He just performed year after year. By the time he retired, his numbers were staggering: 590 receptions, 8,985 yards, and 79 touchdowns. He retired as the Eagles' all time leader in nearly every receiving category and one of the most productive wideouts of the 1970s. Yet, his name was rarely mentioned alongside Swan, Bolitnikov, or Pearson. Carmichael's greatness lived in the margins of memory, respected by players, loved by fans, but largely ignored by the establishment. And maybe that's what hurt the most. He had done everything right, dominated quietly, and represented the game with grace. But when his time came for Canton, the Hall of Fame simply looked the other way. For years, Harold Carmichael waited for the call that never came, and the longer the silence lasted, the louder it spoke. Decades passed, the game evolved, new stars rose, records fell, and fans began to forget the quiet giant who once ruled the skies over Veterans Stadium. Harold Carmichael faded into the background, still active in the community, still representing the Eagles organization, but far from the headlines. Every few years, his name would surface in the Hall of Fame discussions. Writers would debate his stats, compare eras, nitpick his speed or style, but the votes never came. For 35 years, Carmichael waited. The league had long celebrated its talkers, its icons, its rebels, but somehow it kept missing the man who let his play speak louder than words. Then in 2020, the phone finally rang. The Hall of Fame committee had made its decision. Harold Carmichael would be enshrined in Canton, Ohio. When he took stage that August, he wasn't bitter. There was no speech of revenge, no list of receipts, just gratitude. He thanked his teammates, his city, and his faith. And in that moment, you could feel what made him different. A grace the NFL didn't always know how to celebrate. Behind him sat generations of players who had benefited from the road he paved: tall receivers, HBCU standouts, and soft spoken leaders who refused to fit into someone else's mold. It had taken too long, but the truth had finally caught up. The man who had once been too tall to play now stood forever among the game's greatest. And as he raised his gold jacket to the crowd, one thing was clear: Harold Carmichael didn't just change how football looked, he changed what greatness could be. Long before today's superstars leapt over defenders for one handed grabs on Sunday Night Football, there was Harold Carmichael. Quiet, towering, unstoppable. He didn't need a dance in the end zone or a camera in his face. His statement was simple: throw it high, and I'll go get it. Carmichael's story isn't just about numbers, it's about resilience, about how a man that experts dismissed redefined an entire position through patience and purpose. He proved that greatness doesn't have to be loud, that sometimes the strongest presence in the room is the one that doesn't say a word. Today's Giants, Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, all trace their lineage back to that 6'8" receiver in midnight green who forced the league to think bigger. When the Hall of Fame finally opened its doors to him, it wasn't just a recognition of his career, it was an apology for the years of silence. Harold Carmichael didn't demand attention, he earned respect. And in the story of pro football, he'll forever stand tall, not just above defenders, but above doubt itself. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This is Old School Sundays, where the game's forgotten giants rise again.